Are you looking for the best graphics cards for gaming? In this video we will look at some of the 7 best graphics cards for gaming on the market. Before we get started with our video, we have included links in the description. So make sure you check those out to see which one is in your budget range. Number 1. Intel Arc A750. Testing the Intel Arc A750 was a bit like dealing with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. At times, performance looked excellent, sometimes surpassing the GeForce RTX 3060. Other times, Arc came up far short of expectations, trailing the RTX 3050. The drivers continued to improve, however, and with prices now starting at around $200, this represents an excellent value. Just note that some of the cost savings will ultimately show up in your electrical bill, as it's not as efficient as the competition. There are some compromises, like the 8 GB of VRAM. The A770 doubles that to 16 GB, but also costs around $100 extra. Intel's A750 also has to go up against AMD's RX 7600, which is the primary competition at this price, even if AMD's prices have recently increased. Depending on the game, performance may end up favoring one or the other, though Intel now holds the overall edge by a scant 2% at 1080p Ultra. Like Nvidia GPUs, ray tracing games tend to favor Intel, while rasterization games are more in the AMD camp. Intel was the first company to deliver hardware-accelerated AV1 encoding and decoding support, and QuickSync continues to deliver an excellent blend of encoding performance and quality. There's also XeSS, basically a direct competitor to Nvidia's DLSS, except it uses Arc's matrix cores when present, and can even fall back into DP4 mode for non-Arc GPUs. But DLSS 2 still comes out on top, and it's in far more games. Number 2. AMD Radeon RX 7900 XT. With prices now heading up on many previous generation cards, AMD's RX 7900 XT has become more attractive with time. It generally beats the RTX 4070 Ti in rasterization performance but trails by quite a bit in ray tracing games, with both cards now starting at around $699. That brings some good competition from AMD, with all the RDNA 3 architectural updates. AMD also doesn't skimp on VRAM, providing you with 20 GB. That's 67% more than the competing 4070 Ti. However, you won't get DLSS support, and FSR2 works on Nvidia as well as AMD, so it's not really an advantage, plus DLSS still looks better. Some refuse to use upscaling of any form, however, so the importance of DLSS and FSR2 can be debated. Something else to consider is that while it's possible to run AI workloads on AMD's GPUs, performance can be substantially slower. That's because the AI accelerators in RDNA 3 share the same execution pipelines as the GPU shaders, and FP16 or Int8 throughput is only double the FP32 rate. That's enough for AI inference, but it only matches a modest GPU like the RTX 3060 in pure AI number crunching. Most AI projects are also heavily invested in Nvidia's ecosystem, which makes them easier to get running. AMD made a lot of noise about its new innovative GPU chiplet architecture, and it could certainly prove to be a game changer in future iterations. For now, GPU chiplets are more about saving cost than improving performance. Consider that the die sizes of AD104 and Navi 31's GPC are similar, but AMD also has to add 5 MCDs, and you can see why it was supposed to be the more expensive card. And yet, performance still slightly favors Nvidia's 4070 Ti overall, and that's before accounting for DLSS and DLSS 3. Number 3. Nvidia GeForce RTX 4060. With the launch of the RTX 4060, Nvidia appears to have gone as low as it plans for this generation of desktop graphics cards based on the Ada Lovelace architecture. We're not ruling out an eventual desktop RTX 4050, but we're also skeptical such a card would warrant consideration, considering how pared down the 4060 is already. There are certainly drawbacks with this level of GPU. Nvidia opted to cut down the memory interface to just 128 bits, which in turn limits the memory capacity options. Nvidia could do a 16 GB card if it really wanted, but 8 GB is the standard configuration and we don't expect anything else outside of its professional GPUs. Only the 4060 Ti 16 GB has the doubled VRAM option, and we weren't particularly impressed by that card. The 4060 class cards also have an X8 PCIe interface, which shouldn't matter too much, though it might reduce performance if you're on an older platform that only supports PCIe 3.0. Nvidia also cut down the number of GPU cores on the RTX 4060 compared to its RTX 3060 ancestor. The 3060 had 28 SMS, streaming multiprocessors, with 128 CUDA cores each, while the 4060 only has 24 SMS. Higher clocks make up for the deficit, but the RTX 4070 and above all have at least the same number of SMS as their predecessors. The good news is that, as promised, performance is at least faster than the previous generation RTX 3060, by about 20% at 1080p and 1440p. There are edge cases in some games, meaning 4K at max settings, where the 12 GB on the 3060 can pull ahead, but performance is already well below the acceptable level at that point. As an example, Borderlands 3 ran at 26.5 FPS on the 4060 versus 28.9 FPS on the 3060 at 4K badass settings. Neither is a great experience, even though the 3060 is technically faster. There are other benefits with the 4060 as well. You get all the latest ADA features, including DLSS 3 frame gen support, YAWN. Also, the power draw is just 115W for the reference model, and typically won't exceed 125W on overclocked cards, like the Asus Dual OC that we used for testing. Most RTX 4060 cards also don't bother with the questionable 16-pin power connector and adapter shenanigans. Number 4. AMD Radeon RX 7900 XTX. AMD's Radeon RX 7900 XTX ranks as the fastest current graphics card from AMD, and lands near the top of the charts with a generational price bump to match. Officially priced at $999, the least expensive models now start at around $900, and supply has basically caught up to demand. There's good reason for the demand, as the 7900 XTX comes packing AMD's latest RDNA 3 architecture. That gives the 7900 XTX a lot more potential compute, and you get 33% more memory and bandwidth as well versus the prior generation. Compared to the RX 6950 XT, on average the new GPU is 44% faster at 4K, though that shrinks to 34% at 1440p and just 27% at 1080p. It also delivers that performance boost without dramatically increasing power use or graphics card size. AMD remains a potent solution for anyone that doesn't care as much about ray tracing, and when you see the massive hit to performance for often relatively mild gains in image fidelity, we can understand why many feel that way. Still, the number of games with RT support continues to grow, and most of those also support Nvidia's DLSS technology, something AMD hasn't fully countered even if FSR2/FSR3 can at times come close. If you want the best DXR/RT experience right now, Nvidia still wins hands down. AMD's GPUs can also be used for professional and content creation tasks, but here things get a bit hit and miss. Certain apps in the SPE Viewper suite run great on AMD hardware, others come up short. However, if you want to do AI or deep learning research, there's no question Nvidia's cards are a far better pick. For this generation, the RX 7900 XTX is AMD's fastest option, and it definitely packs a punch. If you're willing to step down to the 7900 XT, that's also worth considering, see below, as it tends to be priced quite a bit lower. Number 5. Nvidia GeForce RTX 4070. Nvidia's RTX 4070 didn't blow us away with extreme performance or value, but it's generally equal to the previous generation RTX 3080, comes with the latest Ada Lovelace architecture and features, and now costs about $150 less. With the launch of the RTX 4070 Super, see above, it also got a further price cut and the lowest cost cards start at around $530. We recently looked at the RTX 4070 versus RX 7900 GRE, and ultimately gave the nod to the Nvidia card. That's based more on the Nvidia ecosystem, including technologies like DLSS and AI features, as well as the very efficient architecture. If you're only interested in performance, the RX 7900 GRE makes a compelling case. Nvidia rarely goes after the true value market segment, but with the price adjustments brought about with the recent 40 series supercards, things are at least reasonable. The RTX 4070 can still deliver on the promise of ray tracing and DLSS upscaling. It only uses 200 W of power, often less, and in raw performance it outpaces AMD's RX 7800 XT, slightly slower in rasterization, faster in ray tracing, plus it has DLSS support. Nvidia is always keen to point out how much faster the RTX 40 series is, once you enable DLSS 3-frame generation. As we've said elsewhere, these generated frames aren't the same as real frames and increase input latency. It's not that DLSS 3 is bad, but we prefer to compare non-enhanced performance, and in terms of feel we'd say DLSS 3 improves the experience over the baseline by perhaps 10 to 20%, not the 50 to 100% you'll see in Nvidia's performance charts. The choice between the RTX 4070 and the above RTX 4070 Super really comes down whether you're willing to pay a bit more for proportionately higher performance, or if you'd rather save money. The two offer nearly the same value proposition otherwise, with the 4070 Super costing 13% more while offering 16% higher performance on average. Number 6. AMD Radeon RX 7900 GRE. The Radeon RX 7900 GRE displaces the RX 7800 XT as our top AMD pick. It uses the AMD Radeon A3 architecture, but instead of the Navi 32 GPU in the 7800 XT, it sticks with the larger Navi 31 GCD and offers 33% more compute units. AMD balances that by reducing the GPU and GDDR6 clocks, though it's possible overclocking can return some of those losses now that AMD has fixed the 7900 GRE overclocking bug. But the 7800 XT remains a close second, and that remains a decent alternative. Both the 7900 GRE and 7800 XT offer a good blend of performance and price, but the 7900 GRE ends up about 10% faster for 10% more money. Linear performance scaling on a high-end GPU makes the more expensive card the best overall pick of Team Red's current lineup. That's assuming you're like us and tend to want a great 1440p gaming experience while spending as little as possible. There are certainly faster GPUs, but the 7900 XT costs 27% more while delivering about 20% more performance, so diminishing returns kick in beyond this point. Efficiency has been a bit hit or miss with Radeon A3, but the 7900 GRE ends up as AMD's most efficient GPU right now, thanks at least in part to the reduced clocks. More processing clusters running at lower clocks is a good way to improve efficiency. It's also faster than the previous generation 6950 XT while using over 60 W less power. In addition, you get AV1 encoding support and DP 2.1 video output, plus improved compute and AI capabilities. It's over 3 times the image throughput of the 6950 XT in Stable Diffusion, for example. AMD continues to offer more bang of the buck in rasterization games than Nvidia, though it also falls behind in ray tracing, sometimes far behind in games like Alan Wake 2 that support full path tracing. Is that something you want to try? It doesn't radically change the gameplay, though it can look better overall. If you're curious about fully path-traced games, including future RTX remix mods, Nvidia remains the best option. Otherwise, AMD's rasterization performance on the 7900 GRE ends up tying the 4070 Super at 1440p, for $50 less money. We're also at the point where buying a new GPU that costs over $500 means we really want to see 16 GB of memory. Yes, Nvidia fails in that regard, though in practice it seems as though Nvidia roughly matches AMD's 16 GB cards with 12 GB offerings. There are exceptions, of course, but the RX 7900 GRE still checks all the right boxes for a high-end graphics card that's still within reach of most gamers. Number 7. Nvidia GeForce RTX 4070 Super. Nvidia refreshed its 40 series lineup at the start of 2024 with the new Super models. Of the three, the RTX 4070 Super will likely be of interest to the most people. It inherits the same $599 MSRP as the non-Super 4070, which has dropped to $549 to keep it relevant, with all the latest features of the Nvidia Ada Lovelace architecture. It's slightly better than a linear boost in performance relative to price, which is as good as you can hope for these days. There appear to be plenty of RTX 4070 Super base MSRP models available at retail. We like the stealthy black aesthetic of the Founders Edition, and it runs reasonably cool and quiet, but third-party cards with superior cooling are also available, sometimes at lower prices than the reference card. The 4070 Super bumps core counts by over 20% compared to the vanilla 4070, and in our testing we've found that the general lack of changes to the memory subsystem doesn't impact performance as much as you might expect. It's still 16% faster overall, at 1440p, even with the same VRAM capacity and bandwidth, though helped by the 33% increase in L2 cache size. Compared to the previous generation Ampere GPUs, even with less raw bandwidth, the 4070 Super generally matches or beats the RTX 3080 Ti, and delivers clearly superior performance than the RTX 3080. What's truly impressive is that it can do all that while cutting power use by over 100 W.